think you've heard bad excuses? Give me 30 seconds. I wasn't cheating, he said, still catching his breath. I was participating in a loyalty simulation. I stared at him, my hand still on the door handle. What? He nodded like this was normal. It's like exposure therapy. You put yourself in tempting situations to strengthen commitment. There was lipstick on his collar. He followed my gaze. That was part of the test. That's when I realized this wasn't going to be a normal conversation. I found a receipt in my boyfriend's jacket for 2 desserts at a place we'd never been. When I asked, he didn't hesitate. I ordered both to compare texture profiles, he said. For us. I blinked. Us? He nodded. I'm optimizing our future date nights. I pointed at the second spoon listed on the receipt. He smiled slightly. You can't evaluate sharing dynamics alone. I just stood there, trying to understand how research suddenly required candles. So you sat there alone, with 2 spoons? I asked. He hesitated just long enough. Not alone, he said carefully. I invited a control participant. I stared at him. What? He leaned forward. Someone neutral. No emotional bias. I laughed once. Neutral doesn't usually hold your hand across the table. He nodded slowly. That was to test comfort thresholds. The worst part? He sounded genuinely proud of the experiment. My girlfriend told me she was going to a yoga retreat with strict silence rules. 2 days later, I saw a video of her at a rooftop party, laughing over loud music. When she came back, I showed her the clip. She didn't panic. That's not what it looks like, she said. I waited. The retreat includes controlled exposure to chaos, she explained. You're supposed to maintain inner silence while everything around you is loud. So the drinks? I asked. Hydration exercise, she said instantly. And the dancing? She paused. Balance training. I looked at the guy spinning her around in the video. And him? She smiled calmly. He was part of the external stimulus. I didn't even know where to begin. It wasn't the lie. It was how complete it was. Like she had built an entire alternate version of reality just to avoid saying one simple thing. That's when I started noticing a pattern. It's never just an excuse. It's a full system. A structure. They don't just lie, they build frameworks around the lie so it sounds intentional. Almost intellectual. And if you hesitate, even for a second, they treat that hesitation like confusion on your part. Like you're the one failing to understand something complex. That's what makes it dangerous. It doesn't feel chaotic. It feels designed. I came home early and found my partner sitting on the couch with someone I had never seen before. They both froze. Oh, he said, standing up quickly. You're back early. I nodded slowly. Who is that? He didn't even look at her. She's here to evaluate my listening skills. I stared at him. You're what? He gestured toward her like this was official. I've been working on active communication. She's a consultant, he added. The woman gave a small wave like she wasn't sitting way too close to him. We were practicing emotional presence. I crossed my arms. And the wine. He didn't miss a beat. Helps with vulnerability. I looked at the 2 glasses. You needed candles for vulnerability. He nodded once. Atmosphere affects honesty. I stood there for a second, realizing this wasn't awkward for him. Just for me. I noticed my boyfriend had started sleeping with his phone under his pillow. One night, it buzzed. I reached for it. He woke up instantly. Don't touch that, he said, too fast. I froze. Why? He sat up slowly. Because it's not just a phone anymore. I stared at him. What does that mean? He hesitated, then lowered his voice. I'm part of a behavioral study. They monitor how I react to interruptions. I blinked. At 3 in the morning. He nodded. That's when reactions are most authentic. I held up the phone anyway. A message popped up, I missed last night. I looked at him. He didn't flinch. That's part of it, he said quietly. They simulate emotional triggers. I felt something shift in my chest. Not anger. Something colder. Because either he was lying or he had convinced himself this made sense. There's a moment in these conversations where logic just stops working. Not because you don't understand, but because the explanation isn't meant to be understood. It's meant to overwhelm. To flood you with just enough detail that arguing feels exhausting. And once you're tired, they win. Not because they were right, but because you stopped trying to prove they weren't. I saw a charge on our account for a luxury hotel downtown. When I asked my girlfriend, she took a deep breath like she had prepared for this. I needed to isolate variables, she said. I blinked. Variables. She nodded. Our relationship has patterns. I wanted to see how I feel outside of them. I stared at her. So you checked into a hotel? She smiled slightly. It's called controlled distance. Controlled distance? I repeated. She nodded like this was academic. You can't measure emotional dependency from inside the system. I let that sit. And the room service for 2. She didn't even blink. Baseline comparison. I stared at her. With who? She paused just slightly. A neutral presence. I almost laughed. Neutral doesn't leave lipstick on glasses. She tilted her head. You're focusing on surface details. My boyfriend missed my call 3 times, then texted back, in a meeting. Later that night, I saw a video of him at a bowling alley, cheering. When I asked him, he didn't deny it. It was a meeting, he said. I waited. We were aligning team morale. I blinked. By bowling? He nodded. Performance improves when people feel seen. I pointed at the beer in his hand. And that? Facilitates openness, he said calmly. I stared at him. And the girl hugging you. He didn't even look at the screen. Recognition moment. I laughed once. She kissed you. He nodded slowly. High engagement environment. There was no hesitation. No guilt. Just translation. Like every obvious thing had a different name now. And somehow, he expected me to accept the renamed version as truth. That's another pattern. They don't deny reality, they rename it. Suddenly, nothing is what it looks like. Cheating becomes research. Lying becomes strategy. And if you push back, they act like you're being overly literal. Like you're missing the bigger picture. But the bigger picture always seems to benefit them. Funny how that works. I found a second toothbrush in the bathroom. Not mine. When I asked my partner, he leaned against the sink like he had time. That's for guest simulations, he said. I stared at him. What? He shrugged. I'm practicing being a better host. I picked up the toothbrush. So you brush someone else's teeth? He smiled slightly. No. I simulate their presence. I just stood there, holding it. And the perfume? I asked, pointing at the counter. He followed my gaze. Atmospheric detail. I exhaled slowly. You created a whole person. He nodded. It helps with empathy. I looked at him. Did this simulation sleep over? He paused. Just for a second. That depends on how you define presence. That was the moment I realized he wasn't trying to convince me. He was testing how far he could go. My girlfriend started taking late-night walks alone. Or at least, that's what she said. One night, I followed her. She didn't go far. Just around the block and straight into a car. I waited until she came back. When I asked her, she didn't flinch. I'm confronting fear patterns, she said. I stared at her. By getting into strangers' cars. She shook her head. They're not strangers. They're part of the process, she added. I felt my chest tighten. What process? She smiled softly. Releasing control. I stared at her. That's not what that is. She tilted her head. You're interpreting it through fear. I almost said something, then stopped. Because again, it sounded structured. Thought out. Like there was a version of this that made sense. Just not one I had access to. At this point I thought I understood the pattern. I didn't. Here's the thing. At some point, it stops being about the excuse. It becomes about control. Not controlling what happened, but controlling how it's perceived. If they can reshape the story, they reshape your reaction. And if they reshape your reaction, they never have to deal with the reality of what they did. That's the real game. I found a pair of men's shoes by the door that weren't mine. When I asked my girlfriend, she glanced at them like she forgot they were there. Oh, she said casually. Those are part of a behavioral installation. I blinked. A what? She nodded. I'm experimenting with how objects influence emotional responses. I looked at the shoes. By bringing someone else into the apartment. It's not about the person, she said calmly. It's about your interpretation of the object. I stared at her. The object walked in here. She didn't react. You're attaching narrative where there doesn't need to be one. I laughed once, short and sharp. Shoes don't just appear. She tilted her head slightly. Everything appears somewhere. I realized then, logic wasn't missing. It was being replaced. I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. A woman's voice. Hi, she said softly. I think you should know something. My stomach dropped. She told me everything. Times, places, details. When I confronted my partner, he listened quietly. Then he nodded once. That was a narrative disruption, he said. I stared at him. She's lying. He shook his head. No. But she doesn't understand the context. Context? I repeated. He nodded calmly. You're hearing fragments without structure. I stared at him. She described your entire weekend. He didn't react. Yes, he said. But without the framework, it sounds misleading. I felt something snap. So what's the framework? He took a breath. Growth requires uncomfortable situations. I laughed once. For who? He looked at me. For both of us. That's the final layer. When the excuse stops defending the action and starts redefining your role in it. Suddenly, you're not the person being lied to, you're the obstacle. The limitation. The one who doesn't get it. And if you accept that framing, even for a second, you lose. Because now, their behavior isn't the problem. Your reaction is. I noticed my boyfriend had started writing things down in a small notebook. Names. Times. Places. When I asked him about it, he closed it too quickly. Just observations, he said. I reached for it. He pulled it back. It's part of a tracking exercise. I frowned. Tracking what? He hesitated. Then quietly, patterns. I didn't like the way he said it. Not curious. Not thoughtful. Controlled. Later, when he was in the shower, I opened it. My name was everywhere. Times I left. Things I said. Reactions I didn't even remember having. Notes like subject becomes suspicious when presented with incomplete information. My chest tightened. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. I'm trying to understand you better, he said. I stared at him. By studying me. He nodded. By anticipating you. My girlfriend came home one night wearing a jacket that wasn't hers. I asked about it. She smiled. It's part of a role exchange exercise, she said. I blinked. With who? She shrugged slightly. Someone outside our dynamic. I stared at her. You traded clothes. She nodded. It helps dissolve attachment to identity. I pointed at the sleeve. He left his phone number in the pocket. She glanced at it like it wasn't important. That's just residue, she said. I laughed, but it didn't feel like laughter. Residue doesn't text you. Her phone buzzed right then. She didn't check it. You're focusing on the wrong layer, she said calmly. I looked at her for a long second. No, I said quietly. I think I'm finally seeing the right one. This last one. I still don't know if it was a lie. By this point, something shifts. It's not about catching them anymore. It's about recognizing the pattern before it finishes. Because every excuse follows the same path: confuse, reframe, overwhelm, redirect. And if you've seen it enough times, you stop reacting to the words and start watching the structure behind them. One night, my partner didn't come home. No message. No call. Nothing. By morning, I was already preparing myself for another explanation. When they finally walked in, I didn't even ask right away. I just looked at them. They looked tired. Not guilty. Not nervous. Just tired. Do you want to hear what happened? They asked quietly. I nodded once. They sat down slowly. I was somewhere I shouldn't have been, they said. No rush. No performance. Just that. I waited. And? I asked. They looked at me. And I don't have a version of it that makes me look better. I didn't say anything. For the first time, there was no framework. No structure. Just silence sitting between us, heavy and unfamiliar. And that's what stayed with me. Not the lies. Not the ridiculous explanations. But that moment. Because after everything, the theories, the systems, the perfectly constructed excuses, the truth wasn't complex at all. It didn't need language. It didn't need strategy. It just existed. And somehow, that was the hardest thing to face.